Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the audiobook series. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe, and today's episode we'll be reading the first few chapters of Amyntas, Son of Persia. Now, Amyntas, Son of Persia is not necessarily a sequel to The Gathering, but it's in the same universe. Now, it is a spin-off of The Gathering and the beginning of its own series, Tales from The Gathering. Now, as a little spoiler, well, semi-spoiler, the events of The Gathering actually led to the creation of Amyntas, Son of Persia. There is a major plot element in The Gathering that ties to Son of Persia. And in the synopsis, it reads as followed. Cairo said that if anyone returned to the moment they were summoned, the timeline would change forever. What if Amyntas went home? How would life be different? Plataea. 479 BC. The Persians and the Greeks are locked in a final battle over the dominion of Greece. The Athenians numbered only 8,000 men, while their enemies numbered 60,000. But what are the Spartans? They're present too, but they did not fight for Greece. They fight with Persia. Leading them was a young Spartan named Amyntas. After the victory, the young Spartan is brought before the king, giving him a new assignment to protect the crowned prince, Artabanus. From the shadows, an enemy watches. Amyntas shows the prince his new fortunes and what to expect when he is king. Then war breaks out in Macedonia to the north, sending both men with the army. Treachery soon strikes, and the two men are sold into slavery to the Carthaginians. For 6 years they are held until they meet a familiar face. Hearing news of home, the three desperately quest to save an empire. From Macedonia to Sicily, Thrace, and the heart of the Persian Empire. From the author of The Gathering, yours truly, witness a new saga following a familiar face. Will Amyntas be victorious and save the Persian Empire? And will he recover his memories of the past and remember the friends he had forgotten? Now, as I said, the elements of The Gathering led to the creation of Son of Persia and the following books in Tales of the Gathering series. And this book is arguably an alternative fiction/fantasy novel. And I'm really, really proud of this and this series. I always love going back to The Gathering because it was the first. And just like The Gathering, you have a map, courtesy of Lori Ball, otherwise known as Autumn Amber, Maiden of the Forest on Instagram. Now, let us begin the world of Son of Persia. Prologue, Plataea, 479 BC. Tell me if you've heard this story before. The mighty Persian Empire, under the reign of King Xerxes, invaded the Greek city-states, a promise he made to his father. After Thermopylae and Salamis, Plataea was the deciding battleground over Greece's fate. The Athenians, under the command of Themistocles, numbered 8,000. Their enemy was more than 8 times their size and strength. But what of the Spartans? They're here as well, and today will never be forgotten. But what if I told you that this story had another ending? This ending only marked the beginning of a much grander tale. Here begins the story of the Son of Persia. For Persia, shouted Mardonius. Mardonius was the commander of the land offensive of the Persian army under Xerxes. He and his forces engaged the small Athenian army in a head-on collision on the plains. Despite having the advantage in numbers, the Persians realized the Athenians were not going down without a fight. As the Persians pushed on ahead, Mardonius heard the sound of a trumpet in the air. He received word from one of his subordinates that the Athenians had called in their allies from Megara, around 12,000 soldiers. The Persian commander realized their flanks were exposed. Have the immortals fortify our flanks. We cannot lose now. We are so close. The subordinates saluted and sounded the trumpet. Answering the call was the Persian elite, the immortals. Following their commander's orders, the Persians headed toward the army's rear and stood guard to protect it. Just in time, too, as the army from Megara had just arrived. The immortals raised their shields and prepared for the onslaught. "Attack!" shouted one of the Megarian commanders. The Megarians charged and ran to the Persian flanks. The immortals kept them at bay, but they were slowly losing men. In the center, Mardonius saw his men being pushed to the brink. Just then, his worst fear was imagined. The Athenians managed to push the Persians back and break through their lines. The commander's eyes widened with horror. All seemed lost until he heard a loud yell in the air. "Ahu! Ahu! Ahu!" The sound came from over the hills. Soon, everyone began to hear the noise. Then, coming over the mountains, Mardonius saw and yelled a cry of excitement. "Sons of Persia, victory is ours. Our allies have arrived." Coming over the cliffs was Greece's most feared fighting force, clad in bronze from head to toe, wielding mighty shields and impressive spears. It was the Athenians and Megarians' worst nightmare, the Spartans. 3 of Sparta's most dangerous military commanders led them: Pausanias, Pleistarchus, and Amonfredus. "Shall we?" asked Pausanias, the nephew of King Leonidas. Pausanias was a skilled military commander with a large frame. His red, straight hair slightly revealed a chiseled, time-worn face, with shuttered black eyes rooted within their sockets, watching energetically over the Athenians. As he turned to his right, Amonfredus nodded his head. Leonidas' nephew then turned his head to his left. At the head of the army was his cousin, and his cousin's second in command, and a young, up-and-coming soldier from Sparta's most prestigious military families. "Give the order, Spartan!" yelled Pausanias, placing his helmet over his head. Pleistarchus lifted his spear and roared with a thunder that shook the ground. "Spartans, let us put these Athenians to bed!" shouted the soldier. Then, like a massive metal swarm, the Spartans descended the hill. Their battle cries shook the very ground. As they rushed into the fray, the young commander broke his army into 2 groups. One section with Pleistarchus assisted the Persians on the flanks, while the rest following the young Spartan as he charged into the Athenian forces. Unlike his cousin, Pleistarchus had just recently finished his military training. Despite this, he was an astute learner and quick to study. His ginger short hair awkwardly hung over his furrowed, time-worn face with gray eyes. Though recently out of training, he had a noticeable sword mark stretching from the right side of his forehead, running towards his upper lip and ending on his right cheek, leaving a compelling memory of his former lover back home. Thankfully, his helmet hid his scar. Still, he was a Spartan through and through, and he aimed to prove that. While he contended with the enemy, his second in command was off alone, facing the enemy head-on. The young Spartan thrust his spear forward, piercing the armor of one Athenian soldier. He pulled the spear out and struck another Athenian with the butt end, jabbing him. He repeatedly punched the same soldier in the face with his shield until he fell to the ground, coughing up his blood. The Spartan ended the soldier's suffering with by stabbing the man's neck with his spear. Looking up, the Spartan commander looked at the horrified faces of his enemies. They knew Spartan ferocity and were about to get a taste of it. "No prisoners! No mercy!" he shouted. His cry echoed all over the battlefield, emboldening the men even more. "That's the style, boy!" screamed another voice in response. The resounding roar came from the third commander of the Spartan coalition, Amonfredus, Spartan shield-bearer and the king's right hand. Out of the 3, Amonfredus was the most experienced in combat and war. As a veteran of the Ionian revolts and the first Persian invasion, Amonfredus was a skilled tactician and strategist. Despite his skinny frame, he was tall for his age, with gray short hair tied in a ponytail, revealing a fresh, frowning face. Due to his age, his eyes were squinting and turning gray. Despite his age, though, he watched loyally over the men he trained in the heat of battle. Like Pleistarchus, too, he had a sword wound. But this was an old scar, stretching from the top of the right cheek, running across the nose, and ending on the right cheek, leaving a stinging burden of unusual alliance from his past. While others may see him as an old man, everyone in Sparta knew that Amonfredus was a lion, and not to be crossed. Together, he and the 3 commanders were unstoppable. Grabbing Megarian by the throat, he hoisted the young soldier into the air and slammed him down to the ground head first. The young soldier tried to get up, but the veteran Spartan slammed his shield down the man's neck, cracking it. Smiling with glee, he turned to his fellow Spartans and shouted to them, "You heard him! You heard him, men! No prisoner!" He roared. The Spartans around the old veteran cried out in unison. Following their commander's orders, the Spartans attacked their Athenian rivals. The chaos ensued once more. Now was the Persians and Spartans against the Athenians and Megarians. For Mardonius, this was the advantage he needed. With the aid of the Spartans, their army would have no issue winning this war. It was also a chance for the young Spartan to increase their popularity and status among the Spartan elites and the Persian court. As he fought against various enemies, there was one man he wanted to kill, Themistocles. Only a few yards away, the young Spartan could see the Athenian commander defeat several of his Spartan brothers. His enemy then locked onto the Persian commander, Mardonius. "Not today," he said as he moved past several soldiers until he was face to face with his prey. "So, you're him. The Spartan I've heard so much about," says Themistocles. "You escaped us at Salamis. On Amnesia wondered if you survived. That ends now, Athenian dog." The Spartan thrust his spear at him, but Themistocles dodged. "Dog? You Spartans gave up at Thermopylae. Your king bent the knee to the Persians. It is your kind who are dogs now." The words angered the Spartan, and leading him to attack more ferociously. He landed a cut across Themistocles' arm and opened himself up for a counterattack. The Athenian used a Spartan trick against his opponent and punched the Spartan in the chest. His armor took much of the blow, but it did move him back a little. Before the fight continued, Themistocles heard the trumpet calling for a retreat. Gathering his men, he ordered them to fall back. He gave one last look at the Spartan warrior before leaving. "Until next time," said the Athenian commander. As he ran away, the young Spartan removed his helmet, revealing his handsome young face. "Coward," he said to himself. Just then he heard the sound of a horse approaching. Turning around, he saw Mardonius. The young Spartan saluted him. "You saved my life." "Thank you for your aid, Spartan," said Mardonius. "I'm glad we could get here, sir," he replied. Mardonius examined the Spartan commander. He was young and attractive, with amber eyes and curly brown hair. Despite his youthful appearance, he was already a man by Spartan standards. Just then the rest of the Spartan officers arrived on the scene. Mardonius smiled. "Your Spartans helped us win this day, Pausanias. The Greeks are finished but not defeated. We march on to Athens. Are your men ready for another fight?" The young Spartan replied with a salute. Mardonius smiled. "Excellent. Pausanias, gather your men. We march on to Athens." "Understood," he replied. As he gathered his men, Mardonius called upon him once more. "Spartan, what is this young man's name, so I may tell our king?" The young Spartan turned to his commander for approval. "Go on," said Pausanias. The Spartan turned around and answered him with a smile. "Amyntas, sir. My name is Amyntas Baru." Chapter 1. After the victory, Mardonius and his Persians, with Amyntas and his forces, carved a path toward Athens. The city was still recovering after Xerxes set fire to the beautiful city. Now it was under siege once more. Initially, the Athenians had the protection of their wall from the Persian navy. Now it acted as their tomb. Athens was the last beacon of hope for a free Greece. The city-state called for every man of age to help defend the city. It only delayed the inevitable. Once the city gates fell to the constant bombardment of missile and fires, the Spartans and Persians put every citizen to the sword. Only a select few were allowed to live. For almost a week, the days and nights were filled with the screams of people, shouting and cursing at their gods for allowing such an atrocity to happen. On the last day, the once beautiful Parthenon, a temple built to honor the Greek patron goddess Athena, became engulfed in flames. Athens fell. Democracy died. And the hopes of a united and free Greece were lost to the ashes. After the victory, the rest of Greece quickly fell, and Sparta owned all of it. It was the empire's wealthiest and most influential city-state, next to Halicarnassus, which Artemisia ruled. There was one exception, though: Macedonia. Before the invasions, King Alexander I of Macedonia had promised his services to the great Xerxes. After the fall of Athens, Alexander cut all diplomatic ties to the empire and established himself as the last true bastion of hope for the Greeks that fled the carnage. Xerxes was not too worried. To him, the Macedonians were nothing but ants. He was more concerned about his new empire, and one particular Spartan commander. Sparta, a few weeks later. After winning the war, the Spartans and the Persian allies were paraded as heroes among the people. The Persians praised Leonidas for seeing reason and siding with the real winners. Leonidas ordered a festival unlike any other for the Spartan and Persian brothers to honor their great victory. The night was filled with laughter, cheers, and songs of heroic virtues on both sides. Musicians filled the air with triumphant music on their harps, lyres, buzoki, and many more. It made the people happy to know that the war was over. Later in the evening, Leonidas, Mardonius, Artemisia, and the rest of the Persian-Spartan coalition continued with the festivities in Ares' temple. The room was lit with many candles and torches, giving it a warm orange hue. Soldiers and their families conversed amongst themselves and with their Persian allies. This feeling of camaraderie was shared by all, and the feast laid out before them solidified their newfound brotherhood. Grabbing a cup of wine, the Spartan king raised a toast. "A toast to our glorious living and our honored dead," said the king. "Hear, hear," said everyone. All the military leaders and their families sat beside the king. Besides Mardonius and Artemisia, Leonidas' top lieutenants were also present. Nicholas Barrow was joined by his wife Katharina and their son Amyntas, who sat at the table's head. Sitting beside the young Spartan commander were his closest comrades in the army: Pausanias, King Leonidas' nephew, Pleistarchus, and Amonfredus, the veteran, who served alongside Nicholas, his father, many years ago. Mardonius got up and raised a glass for another toast. "King Leonidas, I wish to take this opportunity to thank you and your Spartans. Because of you, we were able to end decades of endless war," he said. He then paused for a moment. "I also want to take this opportunity to thank a young Spartan who not only saved my life, but won us victory at Plataea. His actions, along with his brothers, allowed us to defeat our Athenian enemies and bring about a new era of peace and prosperity." Mardonius looked at Amyntas. "Arise, Spartan, for you are the hero of the hour." "To Amyntas," said the Persian commander. The room was filled with clapping, cheering, and more. Amyntas, removing his helmet, took a stand and bowed before all in the room. Nicholas patted his son on the back and whispered in his ear, "This is your night, my son. This is the beginning of your legacy." Pausanias raised a cup in the air to his friend. "To the bear of Sparta," he shouted with pride. Everyone did the same. "To the bear of Sparta." Throughout the night, Spartan and Persian officers celebrated as if Dionysus filled their cups. Everyone was happy. The war was finally over and ushered in a new era of prosperity. Food was shared, bonds were forged, music and the sound of people laughing brought a smile to the young Spartan's face. Everyone in the temple drank until their bowls were empty, partied and danced until their legs gave out, and told stories of the past, weaving the occasional myth into play now and then. As for Amyntas, he found himself sought after by every Spartan woman. In Sparta, many elite women, like men, are trained at a young age in sports and education, and thus have high standards for choosing a husband. Due to his newfound status, many beautiful and powerful Spartan women quickly approached Amyntas, wishing to know more about him. Luckily, his friends came to his aid to shoo the harpies away. The four men smiled. "Hard to believe it's over," said the aging Spartan. "It was going to end one way or another," replied Pleistarchus. "What happens now?" asked Amyntas. "There's still Macedonia. My uncle said the former ally is now getting support from the Athenians who fled the city." "Even still, Macedonia is a flea compared to the empire," said Pausanias, slurping another cup of wine. "We can't be too overconfident. Macedonia is a skilled adversary. I heard they've been developing new tactics to combat Xerxes' forces," stated Amyntas. "He's right, cousin. After all, he who sweats most in trading bleeds less in war," added Pleistarchus. The four men continued drinking and socializing within the temple. After a few hours, Amyntas slipped out of the temple with his helmet and decided to enjoy the night sky. He looked up into the star-covered blanket above him and smiled. All around him, people were laughing, having fun, and enjoying their life. They did not care that they were Persian subjects. All they cared about was the safety of their families. He smiled and looked back at the night sky again, admiring the moon. "You Spartans know how to celebrate," said a voice. Amyntas turned around and saw a woman behind him. It was Anahita Rhea. She and her family immigrated to Sparta from Ionia after the revolts. They lived outside the city and made their living through various means. Anahita's father worked as a blacksmith and carpenter, while her mother was a fabric designer. The two have known each other since Amyntas began training in the agoge at a young age. Though Sparta had a strict no foreign policy, Anahita and her family are a few exceptions. With most of Greece under Persian control, that may change as well. While she kept to her Persian roots, she learned the Greek language, culture, and philosophy. She was also a skilled bowman, often protecting her homes from wolves. Anahita's long, silky, black hair matched her turquoise eyes well. She wore a beautiful handmade ruby dress embroidered with flowers and precious stones. Amyntas smiled and turned his back to the crowd. "I didn't know you would be here," he asked playfully. "My parents made gift for the king and the Persians inside." She walked next to him and admired the moon. "I hear you won the battle of Plataea." "It was a group effort. The Persians were already engaging the Athenians and their allies. We just arrived just in time to help." "But it's your name the Persians and Spartans chant, is it not?" she questioned. Amyntas chuckled. "My father says this is the beginning of my career. Somehow, though, I feel that I ended it." "What about Macedonia?" she asked. "Macedonia is not a threat to the empire. Yet. If the king does something reckless, we are at peace. But I do feel it will take time for the people to adjust. There may be some tensions, but nothing too serious." As the duo continued talking, they heard the sound of approaching horses coming their way. Amyntas looked at the soldiers approaching them and recognized them as the personal royal bodyguards of King Xerxes, the Immortals, no less. The Immortals were chosen from the warriors who had proven themselves worthy in martial skill and character quality. They wore tiaras on their heads, as they call them, which are loose felt caps, and the bodies were covered in colorful tunics with sleeves and breastplates of iron plate, similar in design to fish scales. The legs were covered in trousers, and instead of standard shields, they carried oval-shaped pieces of wickerwork. They had quivers hanging under their shields, short spears, large bows, arrows made of cane, and daggers hanging from their belts down beside their right thighs. They were Persia's answer to the Spartans. "The king wishes to speak with you," said one immortal. Amyntas was shocked. "The king is here in Sparta. His Majesty resides in Athens. He requests your presence." Amyntas looked at Anahita, who shrugged. Letting out a sigh, he placed his helmet back on. "Best not keep the king waiting." Chapter 2. The ride to Athens was quiet. The two immortals said nothing else to Amyntas as he agreed to follow them to meet the king. It gave him time to think about what the meeting could be. Perhaps I am to be stationed further north to deal with the Macedonians, or maybe the king wants me to join the royal guards. All these thoughts ran through the Spartan's head. When one of the immortals told him they arrived at the king's camp, he was brought out of his deep thoughts. Getting off his horse, Amyntas made himself look presentable and followed the two immortals inside. Opening the tent flaps, Amyntas was taken aback by the sheer magnitude of wealth he saw. Chests filled with gold coins, luxurious fabrics from across the empire, and clay and stone monuments of the great Cyrus, the Persian Empire's founder. In the center of the room was a wooden throne encased with gold and purple highlights. He had never seen such beauty. "Leave us," said a voice. The two immortals bowed and exited the tent, leaving Amyntas alone. "Step forward," said the voice again. Amyntas ambled toward them. Then, emerging from the shadows, were two armed assassins. The shorter man wielded a spear, while the other had a xiphos, or short sword. They both began to corral their target as Amyntas studied them. Naturally, he would unsheath his sword, but decided not to. Instead, he removed his sword belt and placed his shield on the ground. It puzzled the two assassins that the young Spartan spoke to them in a calm manner. "Come then, both of you." One of the assassins charged at the unarmed Spartan with his spear. Amyntas moved out of the way, grabbed the spear, and punched the attacker in the jaw. The blow knocked him down, and Amyntas defended himself from the second attacker. Amyntas knew these men were not soldiers from the wild squinks and undisciplined manner. Blocking a sword strike with the spear, he threw his leg behind his foe and tripped him. Before the assassin could react, Amyntas stabbed the assailant in the gut with the spear. The man gurgled out a yelp before falling dead. The remaining attacker tackled the Spartan and lifted him, trying to crush his body with a bear-like squeeze. Amyntas tried to wiggle his arms out, but he couldn't move. Thinking he had won, the assassin laughed. A fatal mistake. Amyntas headbutted the man with his helmet. The blow stunned the man temporarily. Repeating the attack, Amyntas hit the man over and over with his helmet until the man let go of his grip and covered his bloody face. He groaned and began to stagger. Not bad, but not good enough, said Amyntas. Seeing the sword, he scrambled over to it and threw the sword directly at the attacker's face. The blade smoothly went through both hands and permanently pinned them to the man's face. Huffing, Amyntas got up from the ground. He then heard clapping coming from behind him. Bravo! An extraordinary performance, said the voice again. The young Spartan turned around and saw a man sitting on the throne. He had curly black hair with an equally curly black beard. He wore a circular gold crown, a purple regal gown, and a gold chain of Persia's house around his neck. Amyntas soon bowed before the figure. You honor me, my king. The man standing before Amyntas was none other than Xerxes. Xerxes was a subtle, complex figure. He knew when to be ruthless and malicious, but was known to be patient, cautious, and restrained. Apologies, Spartan, but I had to see if the truth of Spartan combat were as real as your king Leonidas described them to be, said Xerxes. Thank you, my king, but something tells me you did not summon me to test my martial skill, said Amyntas. Xerxes gestured to him to follow him to a table, where a map of the Persian Empire laid upon it. Tell me, what do you see, Spartan? I see an empire, my lord, replied Amyntas. Is that all? Asked the king. Amyntas thought carefully about his next set of words. He took in a deep breath before answering. I see power, influence, wealth, and capital. A mighty legacy, but one that can be easily be taken away. Xerxes smiled. Excellent. I am glad we agree. With the conquest of Greece, my grandfather's empire is further than ever. He paused for a moment. They say a king is like the leader of a pack of wolves. Victory, and they will follow you to the ends of the earth. Fail, and they will eat you alive. But you are victorious, my lord. You did conquer Greece. Xerxes chuckled and sat back down on his throne. Wolves do not solely exist on the battlefield. They hide amongst the sheep, waiting to strike. Amyntas now understood what the king was referring to. You feel someone may take your life, my liege. Xerxes nodded. The conquest of Greece was a costly but necessary campaign. Many in my court feel that I have wasted the Persian war effort, but I was bound to honor and follow my father's wishes, as you would agree. Amyntas knew through his father that Darius I wanted revenge against the Greeks after their disastrous failure at Marathon. It was a crushing blow to them. He knew the price of living up to one's honor. I do. Is that why you summoned me? To protect you from these wolves? Not me, but my son. Out of the shadows appeared a young boy. He was younger than Amyntas by 6 years. His hair was black like his father, but long and loose. Round his neck was a simple gold chain. He wore a blue skirt with a gold belt tied around his waist. For a prince of Persia, he was dressed rather modestly. This is my son, Artaxerxes. When I die, he will rule Persia. Until that day comes, you are his bodyguard, and will protect him at the exact cost of your life. You will also teach him to be a soldier and lead men into battle. Are you up to the task, Spartan? Amyntas could not say. This was something he had not expected. However, he knew it was unwise to insult the king. Clearing his throat, he gave his answer. My lord, we Spartans are trained to never surrender. I swear your son will be protected, and if that promise is ever broken, my life is forfeit. Xerxes smiled and acknowledged the statement. Very good. From this day forth, your lives are intertwined. Outside the tent, the two immortals that brought Amyntas to the king were listening to the conversation outside. Things are going as planned, my lord. The king trusts the Spartan. The other immortal removed his headgear, revealing a chiseled face. The right side of his face was scarred after a burning incident. His beard had signs of gray, and his one eye was hard and cold. Now, my friend, we begin. Yes, my lord Artabanus, replied the immortal. And with that, my viewers and listeners, we are going to stop there. So now remember, both The Gathering and Son of Persia will appear every Sunday. As for the times, it's up to when I get the videos out, but they will be up on Sunday. Every Sunday for every week. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought of the first few chapters of Son of Persia, and comment below what your thoughts are going forward. As always, like and subscribe and comment below, and I will see you all in the next video.